responsibility. That means what? The central power of government is lawmaking. And this is a concept that was brought forth to the civilized world by Solon in 592 BC. He only held office for 1 year. He did away with slavery at the time, brought about this concept of laws out there, independent, because you had tyrants making the laws. But this is where the democracy makes law. In other words, on a majoritarian basis, we decide this is what we want, the rules of our community or state or federal, and then it's there. If we don't like it, we then change it in a very majoritarian kind of way. That's the process of democracy. Unfortunately, we only have these 24 states, and as you well know, they've been sabotaged constantly by representative government. And basically, even without the sabotage, it's not good law. So what I did for the last 25 years was, as a student of history, a student of governance, I focused on, and I've lectured all over the world on it, even in the community, which is the only democracy in the world, Switzerland. I lectured in Bern, Switzerland, and of course Switzerland, just as an example, when people ask me, well, how would it work if we have people making laws at the federal level? I'll say it worked probably like Switzerland. Switzerland maybe gets 4 issues a year, because once you get over all of the stuff at the beginning, it levels out, about 4 issues a year. Now you got to understand, we copied the Swiss with the federal system, and that was the Bundesbrief in 1292. And then they copied our Constitution in 1848 at the end of a 3-year religious civil war. The only thing that they changed in our Constitution is they brought the people in as lawmakers in partnership with their elected officials. Now, mind you, the Swiss at that time were poor as church mice, and they really had no assets, farm on the side of a hill, 4 languages, 4 cultures, 4 religions, and how did they get along? Well, it's interesting. Today, they're one of the most prosperous people in the world, and they still have been able to pull it together. And so it's the only democracy in the world where you have government by the people, not any other democracy. And so isn't it interesting that what distinguishes the great success of Switzerland is bringing the people into the process. We can imagine what we could have. You know, there's no question, we're on a downhill. We're an expiring empire, and we're going the way of all empires. But I, like you, love my country. I'd like to see it rejuvenated and get back up to the city on the hill. And they could only do that, not from representatives. It can be done by the people themselves. So I wrote a piece of legislation. It's called the National Initiative. You can go to the website ni4d.us or nationalinitiative.us. I won't go into details because you don't need a lecture on how you make laws in Congress. Because what I've been able to do is, with the statute, is to just take the procedures and tweak them so that they can apply in every government jurisdiction of the United States. But the first part of it is a constitutional amendment. So it's a package. National Initiative is 2 pieces of legislation. One is a constitutional amendment, and the other is the act of procedures that the people will employ, and it creates also a citizens' trust that will administer the procedures on behalf of the people, not the representative government. Because representative government is over here. We don't do anything to that one, but we bring the people in over here with their own independent agency. And the cost of it, God, not even worth one fighter plane for 5 years. So now what we have, and what's interesting in this, because I had my own agenda, what's interesting in it, other than following the process of Article 7 of the Constitution, that's the precedent, I also have a little paragraph in there, section that says, money for and against initiative can only come from a natural person. Do you know what that means? That means no corporations, no associations. That does away with corporate personhood in this narrow area. Now, I stay away from these other issues because we've got enough on our agenda just to get this enacted into law. But here's the essence of what I'm talking about. I have unreserved faith in the people. I want you to have the power to make laws. And so when an initiative comes up, I may vote differently than you. I don't care. I want you to be able to vote and make a law. And that's where it's at. That's where the power is. And so for the first time, and I respectfully correct Abraham Lincoln, we never had a country by the people. It was for and of. And it didn't do very well for because it does well for the leadership. But this would be the first time, if this law came into being, it'll be by the people. Because you'd be able to make laws. And that's the central power of government. So I've been at this. I ran for president because I wanted to. I didn't care to become president. Heck, if we had the national initiative in place today, you could do more in terms of legislation than all the presidents in history. I mean, stop and think what you could do. They couldn't go to war without the people. How many want the right to go to war or not go to war? Raise your hands. Okay, let me tell you, that's where I'm at. I want to take it out of the hands of the Congress, which is gutless and won't even declare war anymore. When I was fighting and filibustering the draft, I introduced an amendment to go to war in Vietnam. At least be honest about what we were doing there. Well, you know something? I got 7 votes. So politicians do not have that capacity. It doesn't make them bad people. Democracy, the way we've structured it, creates what they are. They're our creation. And so now, if you have the people who can set policy, they'll do a better job because they'll reach back into the bowels of the government and take all that power and use it on a daily basis to do a better job. Politicians want to do a good job. They just get corrupted by the process. It's human nature. So that's where I'm at. People say, well, how do you go around the government? Will the Congress buy this? I don't care if the Congress buys it or not. I've taken this issue to the Supreme Court, and they wouldn't even touch it. And so I have devised, after, that was in '97 when we went to the court, and they wouldn't grant certiorari, I devised a way to go around the government. And it's real simple. And that is that, stop and think, since the very beginning, all elections were determined by the majority or plurality of the people who turned out for the election. At the beginning, it was just members of Congress and the President. And so that's from the very beginning. So it means that today, if you want to have a precedent as to how to enact something, you've got to say that it should be, on a national basis, the majority of the people who voted in the last presidential election. That's what it would take to enact the national initiative into law. There's a seat right there, right there. So that's what it would take to enact this into law. And so now, how many people is that? That's over 60 million people. And so when I ran for president, it was to try and tell the American people, polls show overwhelmingly you want to be empowered. You need to know that right on a shelf, you can just go to one site and vote for it. And when you get 60 million people, it's the law of the land. And I haven't had a constitutional scholar in the United States lay a glove on this. And I've challenged, and we've got support from scholars at Yale, Harvard, Georgetown, to Berkeley, and another one down south. No, they can't lay a glove on it. Let me tell you why. It's so simple. All you do is got to read the Constitution. Right in the preamble. That's the guts of the Constitution. The rest is just boilerplate of how the government's structured. The guts are, we the people do ordain. Now, isn't that a piece of work? We the people do ordain. What does that mean? That means you're God. We're God. If you want to make a parallel. Because God ordains. Whoever she or it is. And so we the people do ordain. And so now, if we are the ordainers or creators of our government, does it make any sense that we have to get permission from the government to change the government? Of course not. Because if we have to get permission from the government to do it, then we the people don't ordain squat.